The billionaire CEO who met the wish of a poor waitress to continue watching Arsenal football matches throughout the season. Kessington stood just inside the doorway of the crowded Brooklyn diner, rainwater dripping from his suit jacket and pooling at his feet. The storm outside had soaked him completely, and his usually neat hair clung to his forehead as he tried to wipe water from his briefcase. Customers turned briefly to look, but it was Alice, the young waitress with a faded apron and an Arsenal scarf around her neck, who rushed toward him with a towel in her hand. She didn't hesitate. She pulled a chair out for him, set a steaming cup of coffee on the table, and said, "You look like you've had a long morning. Sit. Warm up." Her kindness caught him off guard. As he lowered himself into the seat, she noticed the small Arsenal keychain hanging from his briefcase, and her eyes lit up with sudden excitement. Before he could speak, she leaned forward slightly, curiosity written all over her face. Why would a man dressed like that, drenched from a storm, carry something connected to a team she loved so much? What do you think is about to unfold between these two people who come from completely different worlds? Tell us where you're watching from, and make sure you subscribe, because tomorrow we're dropping another powerful story you won't want to miss. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories every day. Kessington did not know why he woke up earlier than usual the next morning. He wasn't the type who jumped out of bed before his alarm. His entire life ran on a strict routine built around scheduled meetings, board presentations, and the constant noise of a corporate world that never slept. But today felt different. The thought of the small cafe, the soft clatter of forks on plates, the warm smell of fresh pastries, and the way Alice talked about Arsenal stayed with him long after he left the restaurant. He remembered her smile when she spoke. He remembered how she kept going even when the day looked long. He remembered how she said watching Arsenal gave her strength. Most of all, he remembered how easily she expressed joy during something as simple as a football game. It had been years since he allowed himself to feel anything unfiltered. His days were filled with public appearances, polished speeches, and the strict formality that came with being a CEO. Spontaneous moments had no place in his world. But Alice had changed something. Not in an instant, not in a dramatic burst, but in a small, quiet shift inside him. He felt it, even if he didn't understand it fully. By the time the sun rose over Manhattan, he had already decided he would go back to the cafe. Not to impress anyone, not because he needed anything, but because he wanted to see her again. He wanted to understand her world a little better. When he stepped outside his luxury apartment building, he left the chauffeured car behind. He didn't want the attention it drew. Instead, he walked down the streets of Brooklyn with a hoodie pulled low over his head. He passed early joggers, shop owners opening up for the day, and tired commuters waiting for buses. It felt strange to blend in. People walked by him without recognition, without expectation, without wanting anything from him. He reached the cafe just after 7. The windows were slightly fogged from the heat inside. A few customers sat with laptops open, others waited in line for morning coffee. It looked exactly the same as before, yet he felt more aware of every detail. The chipped paint near the door. The older man who sat at the same table each morning. The soft hum of the overhead lights. He wouldn't have noticed any of this a week ago. His eyes searched for Alice. She was at the counter, tying her apron. Her hair was pulled back neatly, but a few curls had escaped and framed her face. She looked focused, ready to take on another long shift. When she looked up and saw him, her eyebrows lifted slightly, not in shock, but in quiet surprise. "You're back," she said as he stepped toward the counter. "I am," he replied. "Thought I'd try the place again." Her smile grew, small but real. "Well, good morning. I didn't think you'd return." "I didn't either," he said honestly. She laughed softly before glancing at the screen displaying today's specials. "Can I get you the same thing? Black coffee, no sugar?" He nodded. "Yes. Thank you." As she prepared it, her movements were quick and practiced. She had done this job long enough to know every step by heart. Yet she still treated each customer like they were worth her time. That stood out to him. In his world, efficiency mattered more than kindness. But here, Kindness felt like the main currency. When she handed him his drink, she gestured toward an empty booth near the window. You can sit wherever you want. Morning crowd hasn't fully kicked in yet. He sat down, taking in the view of the busy street outside. He didn't know why he felt calmer here. He didn't know why, for the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about meetings or stock prices. His phone stayed in his pocket. After a few minutes, Alice walked over, wiping her hands on her apron. So, she began, standing across from him, you really want to know why I like Arsenal, huh? He nodded. I do. All right, she said, sliding into the booth across from him. But you'll have to listen while I work. I can do that. She started by telling him about her childhood. She talked about growing up in Newark, where life was not always easy. She came from a small apartment where walls were thin, bills stacked fast, and peace was often short-lived. She told him football was the one thing that always felt steady. My uncle used to watch games whenever he visited from London, she said. When I was about 10, he sat me down and said I should pick a team to support. I didn't really understand the rules at first. I just watched because he enjoyed it. But Arsenal, something about them caught my attention. What was it? Kessington asked. They kept trying, she said simply. Even when things weren't going great. Even when they were losing. They kept pushing. That taught me something. She paused to hand a napkin dispenser to a customer at the next table before continuing. I know people think sports don't matter, she said. But every time Arsenal plays, it reminds me that life can be hard, but you keep moving. You keep showing up. Kessington watched her as she spoke. She didn't exaggerate anything. She didn't dramatize her struggles. She didn't ask him for help. She simply stated her reality. She made him think about how different their lives were. He grew up surrounded by private schools, expensive tutors, and weekend trips to upscale neighborhoods. She grew up fighting for small moments of quiet and learning strength through a sports team. What about now? He asked. You still watch them the same way. She pressed her lips together lightly. Not like before. Since prices went up, I can't afford cable. I watch the highlights on my phone when I get home. And sometimes, I stand outside bars when the weather isn't too cold. He blinked. Outside. She nodded. If I stand near the window, I can see enough to follow the match. People usually ignore me. He didn't know how to respond. He felt a heaviness in his chest, not because he pitied her, but because he was struck by the contrast. For him, money removed obstacles. For her, passion made her climb over them. A group of customers entered, and Alice stood quickly. Sorry, duty calls. He watched her move between tables with practiced ease. She joked with a college student who accidentally spilled sugar packets. She offered extra napkins to an elderly woman with shaking hands. She complimented a child's drawing scribbled on a napkin. Every gesture felt natural. His world was filled with forced politeness, hidden motives, and carefully measured smiles. Her world was full of simple actions that came from real care. He couldn't ignore how refreshing it felt. When the crowd settled, she returned to the booth. So, she said, sitting down again, that's why I like Arsenal. They give me something to look forward to. That's all. He nodded slowly. Thank you for sharing that. She shrugged lightly. It's not a big deal. It is, he replied. More than you think. She looked away, slightly flustered, before changing the topic. You don't follow any sports? Not really, he admitted. Never had the time. You should try watching a match, she said. Not just glancing at it, but really watching. You'd be surprised how fast you get into it. He smiled. Maybe you could show me. Color rose in her cheeks, but she didn't look uncomfortable. If you're serious, sure. Before he could respond, the TV in the cafe switched to a sports news segment. The reporter mentioned Arsenal preparing for an upcoming match. Alice turned her head slightly, smiling at the screen. That smile, so genuine, so unfiltered, felt like an invitation for him to understand her world a little more. The manager walked out from the back, scanning the room. Alice, he called, you can take your break now. She blinked in surprise. But I usually take it later. You've been working non-stop. Take it. She looked at Kessington, then at the TV, then back at the manager. Really? Yes, the manager said, glancing at Kessington in a way that made her realize something. She turned to him. Did you ask him to do that? Kessington lifted his hand slightly. You deserve a break. Her expression softened, but she didn't say anything for a moment. Then she nodded. Okay. She grabbed a seat near the TV as the match analysis played. A few customers had gathered too, chatting about team lineups and match predictions. Alice leaned forward eagerly, changing posture each time the analysts showed a highlight. Her joy was contagious. Kessington stayed close, curious, and surprisingly invested. When the actual match started, the atmosphere in the cafe shifted slightly. People seemed more alert, more focused. Alice kept explaining little details to him. Why a certain pass was smart, why a player moved the way he did, why certain fouls felt unfair. He listened. He really listened. At one point, Arsenal almost scored and Alice gasped loudly, covering her mouth, before laughing at herself. Sorry, she said. I get carried away. Don't apologize, he replied. It's refreshing. As the game progressed, he found himself understanding her passion more clearly. He started noticing patterns in the match. He started asking questions. He even reacted when Arsenal missed a clear chance. Alice nudged his shoulder lightly. See? You're getting into it. He chuckled. Maybe a little. When Arsenal finally scored, she jumped up slightly, clapped her hands, and grinned at the screen. A few customers cheered too, and the mood lifted across the cafe. He found himself smiling, not at the match, but at her happiness. After the game ended, she let out a satisfied sigh. That was a good one. I enjoyed it, he admitted. She gave him a surprised look. Really? Yes. Maybe it's because you were explaining everything. She seemed unsure how to respond, so she simply smiled again. As her break ended, she stood up. Thanks for watching with me. Thank you for letting me. She hesitated before adding, most people don't really care about the things I enjoy. He looked at her for a moment before replying softly, maybe you've been around the wrong people. She didn't say anything, but her eyes held something gentle, almost grateful. The day continued, and he stayed longer than planned. He watched her work, he talked with her during slow moments, and he noticed small things, like how she tapped her fingers lightly when nervous, or how she narrowed her eyes when concentrating on an order. Eventually, he stood up to leave. I'll see you again, he said. You will? She asked, not hiding her hope. Yes. I want to understand this football thing better. She laughed softly. All right. Come back anytime. When he stepped outside, the air felt crisp. The city noise filled his ears. But something inside him felt different, lighter, calmer, more grounded. As he walked down the street, he realized he wasn't thinking about his next meeting. He wasn't thinking about the problems waiting for him at work. He wasn't thinking about the expectations of his position. He was thinking about her. He was thinking about the way she talked about Arsenal like it was part of her life story. He was thinking about how she found joy in small things. He was thinking about how she made him feel something he hadn't felt in years, connection without condition. He wasn't falling in love. He wasn't making judgments. He wasn't letting emotions carry him away. It was simpler than that. He was learning. He was learning how to feel in ways he had forgotten. He was learning that life could be meaningful outside of boardrooms. He was learning that a waitress in a small cafe had the ability to influence him more than all the people who surrounded him for his wealth. He wasn't sure what the rest of the season would look like for Arsenal, or what his next step with Alice would be, but he knew one thing with certainty. This wasn't the end of their connection. It was only the beginning. Kessington stood outside the small sports bar near Midtown Manhattan, the same one where Alice used to watch Arsenal matches before life became too heavy for her to afford it. The sun had barely risen, yet he felt like he had already lived a full day. He had spent the whole night replaying her words in his mind, how something as simple as watching her favorite club gave her strength during the roughest moments of her life. He pulled open the door. The morning staff were setting up tables, wiping screens, and preparing for the evening crowd. None of them recognized him, which was exactly what he wanted. He wasn't here as a billionaire CEO. He was here because he had finally understood something Alice had been trying to tell him without actually saying it. Value isn't measured by wealth. It's measured by how deeply someone feels seen. He walked slowly across the room, studying the place where Alice had spent so many nights after long shifts. He imagined her sitting alone, celebrating every goal, holding on to every match as if it were the only break she got from reality. He stopped at the bar counter, the same spot she had mentioned when she first told him about her love for Arsenal. The manager approached him with a cautious smile, probably thinking he was just another customer with early questions. "Can I help you?" Kessington nodded. "Yeah. I'm trying to understand what this place means to someone I care about." The manager looked confused for a moment, but before he could respond, the door swung open behind them. Alice walked in carrying 2 coffee cups. She froze when she saw Kessington standing there. "Kessington, why are you here?" Her voice wasn't angry. It was more surprised, almost hesitant, as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to hope for anything involving him. Kessington took a step toward her. "I came because you changed something in me," he said. "And I didn't want to pretend I hadn't felt it." Alice blinked, unsure whether she should smile or brace for disappointment. She had spent her whole life expecting life to pull good things away right when she touched them. "Why here?" she asked quietly. "Because this is where your joy lived," he said. "And I needed to see it with my own eyes." Her grip tightened around the coffee cups. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," he replied. "Because you matter." She looked down, overwhelmed by the sincerity she wasn't used to receiving. "Come sit with me," he said softly. Alice hesitated, then nodded. They sat at one of the empty tables where the morning light fell gently across the screens. No match was playing, yet the place still felt alive. Alice exhaled slowly. "So what now?" Kessington folded his hands and looked at her with a steady calm. "That depends on how ready you are to walk into the part of your life that isn't built on fear." She swallowed hard. "Fear of what?" "Fear of believing you deserve better." Alice's breath shook, and she fought the urge to wipe her eyes. "Kessington, I don't know how to do that." "You don't have to know," he said, "but you have to let yourself try." Alice's hands trembled slightly as she placed the coffee cups on the table. Her eyes stayed fixed on the surface, as if the grain of the wood could shield her from emotions she wasn't ready to reveal. Kessington didn't push her. He let the silence settle, not as pressure, but as space she had never been given before. When she finally looked up, her voice was low. "You're talking like I'm someone important." "You are," he replied without hesitation. She tried to laugh, but it came out broken. "Kessington, you're you, and I'm just." "Stop," he said gently. "You're not just anything." Her chest tightened at the certainty in his tone. No one had spoken to her like that in years. People usually looked past her. Even the ones who cared often saw her through the lens of what she struggled with rather than who she was. Kessington leaned back, studying her expression with quiet care. "You didn't grow up with people who told you you were capable of more, did you?" Alice's breath hitched. "No. I grew up learning how to stay small so I wouldn't be a burden." "That ends now," he said, his voice steady and warm. Alice looked away again, overwhelmed. She had spent years surviving on the edges of hope, afraid to want things that felt out of reach. But something about the way he spoke, slow, calm, certain, began to loosen a part of her she had kept locked down. "I don't know what you want from me," she whispered. "Nothing," he said, "but I'm offering you something." She finally met his eyes. "What?" "A chance to rewrite the life you think you're stuck with." Her breath shook again, but this time not from fear, from something closer to possibility. She leaned back in her seat, staring at him with a mixture of confusion and longing. "Kessington, why me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because I've watched you carry your world alone. You don't complain. You don't blame anyone. You just keep going. That kind of strength is rare, and it deserves support." For a moment, the world outside felt far away. No noise, no rush, Just the two of them, and a truth she had never heard spoken aloud. "You think I'm strong," she murmured. "I know you are," he answered. Alice's eyes softened, her walls lowering inch by inch. "I'm scared," she confessed. "That's fine," he said. "Just don't run." She nodded slowly, as if making a silent promise to herself more than to him. Kessington rested his hands on the table. "I want us to take our time. But I need you to understand something first." "What's that?" she asked quietly. "I'm here for real. I'm not leaving when things get heavy." Her lips parted slightly, stunned. He leaned forward. "You're not going to face life by yourself anymore." A single tear slipped down her cheek, quiet, unforced. This time, she didn't hide it. Alice wiped her cheek quickly, embarrassed, but Kessington shook his head gently. "Don't hide that," he said. "It's human." She exhaled slowly, her guard slipping further. For years, she had held herself together with quiet restraint, convinced that showing emotion would only make life harder. Yet somehow, sitting across from him, honesty didn't feel dangerous. It felt allowed. "Kessington," she whispered, "I don't know how to do this." "You don't have to know," he replied. "We'll figure it out together." Her fingers traced the rim of her cup, trying to steady the unfamiliar feeling growing in her chest. "You're sure you want to be part of my life? My world is not easy." "Your world is real," he said. "That's what matters to me." She looked at him again, studying the calm certainty in his eyes. He wasn't trying to rescue her. He wasn't trying to fix her. He was simply choosing to stay, and that alone shook her more than any dramatic miracle ever could. "People don't usually stay," Alice admitted quietly. "I'm not people," he answered. The simplicity of that line hit her harder than anything else he had said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just truth, solid, steady, and without pressure. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine what trust might feel like. She took a slow breath. "I'm afraid of depending on someone." He nodded. "I know, but depending on someone isn't weakness. It's connection." Alice's lips trembled. "What if I disappoint you?" "You won't." "How can you be so sure?" Kessington's voice lowered. "Because your value isn't based on perfection. It's based on who you are." She stared at him, startled. Nobody had ever separated her worth from her struggles before. She had always felt like she had to earn every bit of kindness by holding her pain in silence. Her voice broke. "I don't want to make the wrong step." "Then take small steps," he said. "We don't have to rush anything." Alice let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped inside her for years. "So what now?" she asked softly. Kessington smiled with quiet warmth. "Now, you let yourself believe that someone can see you and not run." Her shoulders finally loosened, as if a weight had been lifted without her noticing. For the first time in a long time, hope didn't feel dangerous. It felt possible. Alice glanced at the empty cafe chairs, then back at Kessington. The city outside hummed with the usual morning noise, but inside it felt like a bubble, a quiet space where the outside world's chaos didn't exist. "I never thought someone like you would notice someone like me," she admitted. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I noticed," he said simply. "Not because of what you do, or where you work, or how hard life has been. I noticed you because of who you are." She studied him, trying to understand the weight of that statement. For most of her life, she had been invisible to people who mattered. Their words often carried a weight of judgment or expectation. But Kessington? He was different. His words were steady, deliberate, and real. "You make it sound easy," she said, shaking her head. "It's not easy," he replied. "Nothing meaningful ever is. But it's worth it. You're worth it." Alice's lips curved into a faint, genuine smile. It was small, but it held all the relief and cautious hope she had buried for years. For the first time, she felt like she could allow herself to enjoy something simple, without fear or doubt. Kessington leaned back, letting the moment linger. He said, "Watching Arsenal games with you, it taught me something I hadn't realized. It's not just about the match. It's about the joy it brings you. That's what I want to be part of, moments that make life worth it." Her eyes glistened. She didn't speak, but her heart understood. She had spent so many nights standing outside bars, watching through windows, thinking happiness was for other people. Now, for the first time, she realized it could be hers too. He reached over the table, just lightly, letting his hand rest near hers. No pressure, no rush, just presence. Alice's hand twitched slightly, then settled near his. She didn't pull away. She didn't move forward. She simply allowed the connection. That small acknowledgement felt monumental. "You're not going to leave?" she asked softly. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. She nodded slowly, absorbing the words. "Then maybe I can start believing that life can be better." "You can," Kessington said, "and I'll be here as you do." They sat together in quiet understanding, the morning sun casting gentle light over their table. The city moved around them, loud and fast, but they didn't care. For the first time, Alice felt seen, and Kessington felt grounded in a way no boardroom or meeting had ever given him. Outside, the sounds of the city continued, but inside that small cafe space, something simple yet extraordinary had happened. Two lives from completely different worlds had found connection, trust, and the beginning of a new chapter. As the camera of life would capture it, the story wasn't about money, fame, or opportunity. It was about kindness, understanding, and choosing to stay when the world often encourages people to leave. And in that moment, for Alice and Kessington, hope wasn't just a dream. It was real, present, and alive. If you're watching this right now, tell us where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this. Tomorrow, we'll drop another story you won't want to miss.